New time. Next new time. I'm chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Third World Solidarity. Our basis that we make on a regular basis is we believe that the best way to make our world a safer place to live in, a more peaceful world to live in, a more just world to live in, is by an open dialogue with people, allowing people to come to this place which is, in our view, the mother of parliaments, so we can hear from all sides and we can help to try and make the world that you come from and the world we live in a better place for all of us. It's very much based, these meetings, on respecting each other's views. We don't necessarily have to agree with each other, but we do expect these people treat each other with respect when we make any contributions and in any discussion we have going forward. We do have a number of speakers tonight, and I'm going to start right at the beginning with my colleague and comrade, Alderman Mushtaq, who's going to talk about the background of our organisation and the work of human rights.
Chairman, thank you very much. Welcome. Come in. David Russell, Kefale Alemu, Saundra, Satterlee. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I think on Ethiopia first, and then I'll tell you something about Third World Solidarity. Ethiopia, I was involved in Ethiopia through Saundra Satterlee. You wouldn't say that Saundra is Ethiopian, but she lived in Ethiopia when she was 17. She was born in the USA. When she was 17, she lived for 1 or 2 years in Ethiopia. Saundra and myself started Third World Solidarity 27 years ago with other comrades. The purpose was to make this world where we live in, and you are living in United Kingdom, in Britain, in London and surrounding areas, and all over the world, a better world for our future generations. Because we believe that we live in a very cruel world. It is a very dangerous world. I have just come with my chairman from another meeting in the other building, and we are going to go back after 1 hour, and I hope you will excuse us. And that meeting is on Pakistan. Today, we are living in a world where we are divided. There are countries which are totally unsafe. You travel there, your foreign office in Britain, America, everywhere will say, don't travel. That part of the world is not where we will recommend our citizens to travel. But there are millions and also billions of people living in that world. So we want to work with those communities which are represented here, whether it is Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Ethiopia, Eritrea, or Somalia, or another country in the world. Because there are human beings who are living there. The blood of those human beings is as red as it is mine or yours or another person. So I think it is very important that in this mother of democracy we work together. And that was the reason when Kefale came into the fold of Third World Solidarity, and he represents East Africa in Third World Solidarity, he leads it. And I think we will have another speaker. He is not arrived yet, but I am expecting him to come here. Kefale Alemu, who was one of the Ethiopian President of Supreme Court. He resigned on the basis of human rights. And we, Dave and myself, with other friends who are working on human rights, including Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, went and saw the minister in the United Kingdom on the issues of human rights a few months back. And we were approached by the Ethiopian ambassador of the time that we would like to invite you to come to Ethiopia. and we are yet thinking of going there, and we might go it, but we need your input into it. And I think through Kefale it will be wonderful if we can know more about the issues of human rights, wherever they are. Also, there is a lot of reports. There are people from Ethiopia living in Kenya, Trevor Truman, who can't be with us today, but I think in future meeting he has promised that he will come. He has visited and made a lot of reports on it. I have been with you few weeks back in front of this parliament when you stood and they've asked a question from the foreign minister that what British government is doing while we are pouring in millions of pounds into Ethiopia. Are we also asking the government to look after the human rights of the people who live in Ethiopia? I think it is very important. My colleague, Lausan, who is also in the other meeting and can't make it, he has extended his apologies. He visited a few months back that part of the world. He visited Sudan and Ethiopia. So it would have been nice if he can come and speak. But I am speaking on behalf of him. He said that there are issues and we are taking it because Lord Hussain of Newton is a part of this British government. He is part of Liberal Democrat, which is part of the government, coalition government in the United Kingdom. And they are also very serious on human rights. They have got many laws, many MPs in the government who are very concerned about the human rights of people in Ethiopia and other part of the world. Third World Solidarity was started 27 years ago, and the main purpose was to bring people together. And I'm very pleased that so many people have turned up. This is our third meeting on Ethiopia in House of Parliament. I think first was on 16th of June 2009. Second was in another building, and I know that some of the faces I can recognize. You were there when Ms. Gomes, MEP from Portugal, came, who was the election monitor in 2005 election. And she clearly said that in Ethiopia there was rigging. There was a very partial election. It was a very badly manipulated. So we remember her speech, and this is the third. But we want you to become more involved in the parliament because, as David said, this is your parliament. You live in this country, you have a vote, you go to your MP, you speak to your MP, you write to your Lord, and you also can exercise your right through councillors and other people who are on the ground and working with you. I think with that, can I once again welcome you all, and we will work together. Because my knowledge, I'm aiming to visit Ethiopia. I've met many Ethiopians living in this country through Kefale and other friends. Aramis is sitting somewhere here, yes, and others in Kilburn, where you have a center. But I don't have, in reality, the knowledge of the people, how they are victimized in Ethiopia. So let's work together to make Ethiopia more peaceful, more prosperous, and your role as a diaspora of Ethiopian background is very important because your knowledge in this country, you can transfer it back. Your people of next generation are here who can learn in the United Kingdom and take it back to Ethiopia and make Ethiopia a better country. And once Ethiopia is a better country, we can have a better world, which Third World Solidarity stands for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mushtaq, the name of the Jews, Saundra Satterlee, as Mushtaq said, Saundra is one of the co-founders of Third World Solidarity, which is a member of the executive committee. Saundra, do you want to come up here and do microphone?
Yes. And I'll do this as well.
First off, Ian Stellard, who spoke at the first meeting that we convened as Third World Solidarity in the House of Commons in this very room, he exposed the famine for television in the UK, and he spoke that first night with our first meeting here. He sends his apologies because he has an ill relative in Ireland and couldn't make it tonight. But he has many stories to tell, and some of you who were here then may remember that he spoke at the time. Subsequent to that, we have a second meeting, and aforementioned by Mushtaq Lasharie for Ethiopia. Ethiopia is close to my heart, and I'm a little surprised that there are fewer people here tonight than the first and the second meeting, but I can only put that down to this is Britain, it's summer, enjoy it for a couple of days possibly, and it's the season, sports, etc., etc. But I know from all the people that I work with that Ethiopia should be more at the front agenda in politics, and it isn't. So, to kick off, I'm going to speak briefly. I'll confine my comments to general observations, peppered with my personal experience in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, and sometimes outside of Addis Ababa. And Ethiopia, as we all know, is, apart from Liberia, Africa's oldest independent state. In our fraught geopolitical world, there's no doubt good news that Ethiopia is more in the media nowadays, not for drought, famine, and war, but for economic development and issues such as a somewhat controversial dam. All that's good news. Positive news is typically economic these days, as reported, for example, in The Economist, that recently talked about GDP and for some while talked about new upstart companies in Addis Ababa. Also in the news, we've seen press coverage about sports, Olympian legends. This, however, is often at the expense of a different story. More specifically, on the level of human rights. For example, the government's sale of agricultural land to foreign companies for a fraction of its worth, and the resulting forceful displacements of the people who own the land, and therefore taking away, robbing them of their very livelihoods. It was reported in The Guardian in February that the Indian companies have purchased 1.5 million acres of prime farmland in this capacity. Or there's the ongoing imprisonment of journalists. Human Rights Watch has reported extensively on this issue. Those who criticize the regime. Or there is the ongoing repression of opposition parties. And of course, those people who champion human rights are often incarcerated, etc. When it comes to human rights and the record of the present government, there is little good to talk about. Ethiopia is one of the poorest nations on earth and is recipient to vast sums of foreign development aid, especially from the United States, which in part has, in the past, been related, and little known today what the relationship is, to a trade-off for military presence in the Horn of Africa, in Somalia more particularly. 2/3 of the Ethiopian people are illiterate after all that's happened. Not a lot has changed since I lived in Addis Ababa as a teenager in the late 1960s. It is true that Haile Selassie, who was in power at the time, created Haile Selassie University, where he drew his teaching stock from long-established university departments in first world nations. For example, when I registered on a part-time basis at the university, I was taught sociology by a Belgian professor. The Belgians were running the sociology department. I just add parenthetically that this prompted me ultimately to go to London School of Economics to study social sciences prior to becoming a journalist. But in addition to that, whilst I was at Haile Selassie University, I learned about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight from an Oxford Dawn. once again, credit where credit is due about Haile Selassie University. Lest we forget, Haile Selassie participated in the creation of the Organization of African Unity, now the African Union. I remember visiting the new building in the 1960s, which at the time symbolized a new era of African independence and self-reliance. Despite certain levels of innovation and what I saw as an enlightenment by Haile Selassie, he nevertheless, lest we forget, was at the helm of a feudal state. Mengistu's overthrow of Selassie in 1974 was followed by Mengistu's well-documented iron-fisted military junta, which was ousted in 1991. I'm sure all of you, forgive me if I'm repeating things that this audience knows so well. Despite a new constitution, however, and it's worth reminding ourselves in 1994, and the promise of multi-party elections, the coalition did little in the way of fulfilling its promises for a more democratic state. As an old U.S. saying states, and comes to mind for me, my way or the highway. And this seems to me quite apt for the rule of government of Meles. And basically, despite being one of the U.S.'s closest allies in Africa, Mr. Meles repeatedly jailed dissidents and journalists, intimidated opponents and their supporters to win one-sided elections, and oversaw brutal campaigns in areas of the country where the Ethiopian military, according to the New York Times, which, as you know, we all know, is not a left-wing publication in any respect, said, raped and killed many civilians. After 20 years in power, in 2012, Meles Zenawi died. Following his death, the then U.S. Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, praised Meles, and I quote, and I find this shocking, I'm a U.S. citizen, personal commitment, end of quote, to lifting Ethiopia's economy and, quote, his role in promoting peace and security in the region, end of quote. This speaks volumes. Meles' acolyte, Haile Mariam Desalegn, is now in charge. But as Human Rights Watch has reported this year, quote, new leadership seems unlikely to result in tangible human rights reforms. For me personally, I'm sure in this meeting others will pick up the story from here. In closing, I would simply like to say that although I came from a liberal background in the United States, living in Ethiopia was when I first encountered poverty and human suffering that I had hitherto thought impossible in our modern world. In contrast, I was wholly struck with the dignity and the generosity of the Ethiopian peoples. Ethiopia laid the foundations for my future unwavering commitment to and hope for a world in which there would be a more equal distribution of wealth and a world where peace, justice, and respect for human rights would prevail, which we stand for at the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Third World Solidarity. Sadly, on all these counts, the global record is not good, and Ethiopia is on a par with too many others in the world. Thank you.
More than was worth it.
will sit here.
Thank you very much, Saundra. Now, I invite our good friend, Kefale, to speak to us and his background information on where we are now. Kefale.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. Good evening. The 2009 meeting, which was held in this marvelous palace, has created awareness about the hidden crimes committed against the Ethiopian people and successfully exposed the human rights violation in Ethiopia. Today's meeting is the continuation of the last two meetings and will brief us on the past, present, and future of Ethiopia, emphasizing on the present looming crisis. The future of Ethiopia depends upon the Ethiopian people, but needs support and attention by the international community. The country's predicament has been worsened after the end of the Cold War, when the previous military regime abandoned the country without a responsible body at national level. This unfortunate situation created favorable conditions for hostile organizations such as TPLF to carry out their hidden and divisive activities in the name of liberty, ethnic federalism, democracy, and the name of the people of Tigray. The opportunistic pseudo-Marxist Leninist organization that has immediately camouflaged by privatization and capitalist system is still confusing the international community. Until his death in 2012, the late notorious ethnic-based dictator Zenawi committed shocking atrocities against the Ethiopian and neighboring innocent people by killing, imprisoning, torturing, displacing, and persecuting. Eritrea, one of the provinces of Ethiopia, has been dismembered without the participation of Ethiopians as well as the Eritrean people. TPLF was simply forcing and advocating separation. Then it carried out illegal separation without a proper agreement and a clear border demarcation. This ignoramus and hatred-based decision instigated a senseless, destructive war that consumed hundreds of thousands of Ethiopians and a huge amount of waste. Consequently, Ethiopia became a landlocked country because of TPLF's refusal to claim Assam and a 500-kilometer coastal line. Americans and most of the international community members wanted Zenawi to claim and take Ethiopia's historical support, but Zenawi, the weak, refused to do so. To date, the unsettled issues because of TPLF negativity to Ethiopia is a great concern for future peace and stability of the area. TPLF is once again trying to complicate the issue of Nile as another old and decayed tactics to sabotage and drag the Ethiopian people to another senseless war for its evil survival. According to the regime's own parliamentary report, 2.7 million Amharas have been disappeared. Many believe that these people are killed systematically using epidemic and other contagious diseases. Even after the natural death of its leader, the group consolidated its power and tightened its grip so as to continue its human rights violations against the Afars, Amharas, Anyaks, Oromos, and other innocent ethnic groups. Furthermore, the remnants have been trying to glorify the dictator with imagined crises and false statements. The people of Ethiopia believe that honoring Zenawi is an insult for all victims of innocent citizens who had perished by his direct order. The group has also savagely vandalized and attacked the history of the country, values, religions, regardless of facts, and the country's legal and historic flag. The incumbent has no limits, and its lawlessness reached at a level where it dared to manipulate and erase factors from the current international digital information by accessing important and useful sites such as Wikipedia. Even Professor Gregory Stanton of the International Criminal Court reported that the regime always changes factors by logging into the edit part of this very innovative website. Ethnic-based racism and anarchy emerged as one of the present day's most dangerous inhuman thinking, which is damaging this wonderfully developing and integrating world. When the international community is coming closer and the purpose of assimilation is in progress, on the contrary, we have been witnessing savagery and brutality in ethnic conflicts and terrorism. During the Second World War, Ethiopia was in similar predicament. Revising the past human history may help us to remember the suffering of the international community because of that destructive war. This again reminds us the most popular quote of the present day, which says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It will be ridiculous to talk about the development in figures, when millions are starving, tens of thousands are displaced, and when genocide and ethnic cleansing are in progress. According to GIF, Zenawi and his group has looted $11.7 billion only between 2009 and 2009. In addition to this, www.therichest.org has reported that the guerrilla fighter Zenawi net worth currently stands at $3 billion US. The remnants of Zenawi have continued to beg money in millions, while they are robbing in billions. The amount of outflow from this poor country reached $16 billion US in 2013. No one today asked the incumbents why they are begging in millions while they are robbing in billions. Why Ethiopia is known as a poor and starving nation if it has elicited this unbelievable amount of financial outflow. Zenawi's regime has marginalized and impoverished the large part of Ethiopia, while he has been investing in railways, heavy industries, roads, electrification, education, and health services for his sole ethnic group. This is not fair. According to the World's Environment Development Agency, a sustainable development is that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. The regime has been doing the contrary by forcing the indigenous people from their ancestral land and by displacing citizens without their consultation and participation. This has encouraged environmental degradation and suffering and compromised the present as well as the interest of the future generations. The unprecedented corruption and unjust distribution of resources across the region has greatly sabotaged and crippled the country's development for the last long 22 years. TPLF has terrorized the Ethiopian people, and Ethiopia has always been victim of terrorists. In an exclusive interview with ESAT, president of the Genocide Watch, Professor Grigor Stanton, said, the FBI has got the TPLF already in its sight. It knows very well that TPLF is a terrorist organization. TPLF is an isolated minority ethnic group that cannot defend itself, leave alone to be an ally against terrorists, and therefore it does not give sense to use terrorism as an excuse of keeping the relationship with this criminal group. Abandoning TPLF and maintaining the good relations with the broad, peace-loving and glorious people of Ethiopia is the only reliable alliance that the international community can be benefited. We ask the international community to participate in bringing all perpetrators to the International Criminal Court or to facilitate the process inside the country. On behalf of Ethiopians and Ethiopian British citizens of Ethiopian descent, I thank the British government for protecting us and for helping us to be the voice of our voiceless people. We thank the Third World Solidarity and the all-party parliamentary group. It is my greatest pleasure to thank Mr. Dave Anderson, MP, and Alderman Mushtaq Lasharie for their compassion and great support to the Ethiopian people at all times. I'd also like to thank the Executive Committee of the Third World Solidarity, Lord Karam MP, and other parliamentarians for their direct and indirect support for myself and other Ethiopian refugees. I want to thank you all for giving your valuable time for this very important and rewarding humanitarian issue. My fellow Ethiopians and British citizens of Ethiopian descent and all the refugees in diaspora, we have foiled the divisive propaganda of TPLF and once again confirms that our unshakable unity and resilience is in progress. We'll continue our just struggle to end the backward divisive system until we attain genuine development, peace, justice, and stability. We are strong and confident because we have both the moral and legal rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would now like to ask Mr. Wogene to speak to us on the issue of corruption. Do you want to come over here?
No, I'm just going to know what you're It would be helpful if you can be a little bit brief. We know you have 15 minutes, but
members of the Third World Solidarity, Councillor Lasharie, and also Saundra. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here today, and I wish I had a projector because I could have shown you lots of things on the projector. Unfortunately, it is not there. What I'm going to talk, in general, what I'm going to talk about is, I've summarized the topic into Ethiopia, legally corrupt state, okay? Where corruption is legally allowed. As long as you don't fall out with the government, you are allowed to amass as much riches as you can, as long as you don't step out of the line, and that is falling out with the government. As you have already heard from Saundra and from Kefale, you see that the Ethiopian government is selling lands everywhere. They evicted the people from Gambela to make way for the Indian agro-conglomerates. They have got a land the size of Switzerland, believe it or not. How can this be acceptable? It's one thing you should tell. The people of Omo have been evicted from their homeland to make way for the international investors. How can we put up with that one? These indigenous people, people's lives have been destroyed totally of our people. A huge land, about 16 square kilometers, have been given to the Sudan. A fertile borderland have been given freely to the Sudan in return for their assistance while they were in the bush fighting the Ethiopian government or the military regime of the time. Can you believe what had happened? The farmers at the land fought back against the occupying Sudanese army, and they managed.
Can't be enjoying Wogene. We've got to empty this room at 8 o'clock, so I'm going to take people's comments or questions, but I'd like it to be short, please, and I will be finishing the meeting exactly at 8 o'clock, okay? Does anybody want to make a comment? If anyone like these meetings, tell me at the back, just be quiet. Please.
The argument for the government to displace people, they say that it's beneficial because it creates jobs. It doesn't. If you look at Chinese, they bring in their own people from their own country, that doesn't hold water. Secondly, they say that it creates security, food security for the country. It doesn't, because what they produce are to be consumed overseas, they export. They produce rice, which is not local still food in the country. The decision made by the government is made at the central government level, by the federal government, not by local government. People are never consulted on the fate of their life in those areas. That's one point I want to make. Secondly, the lower Omo area, it is one of the original area in terms of culture and local genetic pool that is destroyed now to produce sugarcane is what they are doing. In terms of the kind of people who are being displaced, these are the Amhara people from the south, about 3,000. It's focused on one ethnic group right now because the government constitution said that anybody can leave the country as they wish. It's not happening. That's very important to highlight. In terms of the money, the kind of money we heard from Dr. Wogene earlier, when they arrived in Sabah 22 years ago, Mr. Malas and his wife were penniless fighters. Where did this young lady got the £5 million or billion pound in New York? Where is the money coming from? So we understand the British government has interest in Ethiopia for their own diplomatic reasons. We understand that. But we would like you to make it safer. We point here, really. Otherwise, it's leading to a point whereby you would be losing the country in terms to protect your interests. That's no doubt. That's what I want to highlight. BFIT is created to promote good governance in third world countries. Is it happening? No, it's not. So you are defeating your own cause really here. It's very important for the government of this country to account for what they give out, 1.3 billion, I think. They should account the check and balance. That's very important. For us, Ethiopians, it's painful to hear the story we heard earlier. It's painful, but it's very important for us to get organized, to really create a strong human rights group in this country, to vocalize this 100 times, because nobody's hearing us. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Hope you can hear me. Okay. First of all, I would like to say thank you very much for providing this opportunity. And most of the speakers have mentioned the main problems of the region, what the region caused, or what the region has been causing so far. And I believe our discussion should focus on finding the solution. And the main problem in Ethiopia is, I believe there are two main problems. One, the 1994 Constitution. Okay, all parties and members and stakeholders didn't agree or doesn't agree on that agreement, on that constitution. So there should be a discussion on that area. Secondly, the 1960s and 70s revolutionary generation, they got their political ideology, but they failed to come up with some sort of consensus. And I urge the and other stakeholders to push for national consensus so that we can start the democratization process. Without strong and fair institution, it is impossible to have democracy. So, first, we should have some sort of national consensus that may include the constitution and other areas, and then we can start building the institutions that are prerequisite for democratization process. Without an institution, it is almost impossible to have democracy. The army is serving the party in power, and they're just Minister of Justice, and every institutions are serving the party in power. They're not serving the people of Ethiopia. So there should be some sort of national consensus how to get into that stage. That's my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming in tonight and for giving me a lot of food for thought. I'd like to have a look at that $5 million check.
To build the future Republic of Tigray. They don't think Ethiopians. They don't consider themselves Ethiopians. But that is what is going on in Ethiopia. Land. Everybody has got land now. There is land to grab. Ethiopia is up for a sale. Anyone with money can go and get. Believe it or not, Egypt has got 20,000 acres of land. Ethiopian land. What does that mean? How can I put that one? Imagine 1 acre is 1 stadium. 20,000 acre means 20,000 stadium. Just approximately. That much land has been sold. And that land is the land of the Amharas and the land of the Afars. Amharas have been living elsewhere, like within Gojam, for example. At Gojam province, they have been evicted from Gojam to Gojam because the people at the border are not Gojamis. And they have divided us along ethnic lines and putting one against each other and doing all that. Ethiopia is not really that desperate. We have got natural resources. We have got rivers. No one in Africa has got rivers as much as Ethiopia. We have got the mighty Blue Nile. 3/4 of that river, 3 out of 7 that passes the Nile Delta comes from the Ethiopian highlands. 3/7, only 1/7
comes from, no, not 37 story. I'm wrong, absolutely. 7 A's, that is the fraction. 7 A's of the water that passes through Nile Delta comes from Ethiopian highlands. Only 1/8 of the water that passes there comes from the Victoria or the White Nile. How can we, Ethiopians, could be classified as poor while we are waterbed of Africa? Bahro, Ganale, Wagishabele, Awash. You couldn't believe. No one has got as much rivers as we do. And we are the African waterbed. But now and then drought comes and destroys our people. What is wrong with us? Well, the property right now, the entire economy, 50% of it belongs to endowment fund for rehabilitation of Tigray, or in short, effort. The private property of the mafiosi in power, the TPLF. Do you know the meaning of TPLF? Not changing their name, although they are government in Ethiopia. What are they doing? They are just there waiting for the right time to destroy Ethiopia. So that is why we all are here. Ethiopia is now 174 the place out of 187, according to the United Nations Development Program Human Rights Development Index. Okay? Examining World Economic Forum Global Competitive Report, we find ourselves 118 out of 133 countries. Bottom there. Transparency and International gives 33 points at Corruption Perception Index. That really surprised me. Giving Ethiopia 33 out of 90 is something. That means that these people don't know the regime in power. They don't know them at all. Britain has got 74, with Japan, and United States 73, and the highest is Denmark, Finland, and New Zealand, and Ethiopia got 33. Kind of given them only 2. That's what I would give them. We have got natural resources, we have got everything, we have got gold, we have got potassium, we've got not yet exploited oil reserve. We have all that. The gold belongs to effort and Alamuti.
Yeah.
It belongs to these two people. 50% belongs to TPLF, 25% belongs to Alamuti, 12.5% belongs to satellite parties, and the 12.5% belongs to the 90 million Ethiopians still share. Can you believe that? That is a real statistics. Okay, state corruption. May I read Amhara? He says, recently the World Bank released its 448-page World Bank report diagnosing corruption in Ethiopia, with evidence gallery showing that Ethiopia under the absolute dictatorship of Meles Zenawi regime has become a full-fledged corruptory regime controlled and operated by a small clique of corrupt to the core, vampiric, kleptocratic, who cling to power to rid themselves at the cost of public. Perhaps the report's findings should not come as surprise to any, since power corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that is what he says. He made out of. Effort has got 66 satellite companies. 66. Oh, I have to tell you. Guess what? Effort is a charity organization. And what does that mean? It doesn't pay taxes. And what has it got? 66 major. In every sector, they have 2 main big companies. And guess what? Effort enjoys the privilege of two things. One, it is a private company, but enjoys public company's privilege. No taxes, nothing, but all the money goes into the pocket of the officials of the TPLF. That is how it is. I have got lists of all the 66 companies. Mala Zenawi, you say that Neti Kefale say Mala Zenawi got net worth of 3 billion. What a shame! No, that is wrong, guys and ladies and gentlemen. That is wrong, absolutely wrong. I have got here a check, photocopy of a check signed by Samhal Mala Zenawi, the daughter of Mala Zenawi himself, depositing in one of the New York banks $5 billion. I have got it. I'm going to give you the copy. Don't ask me how it came into our possession. But that is the part. And that is the check. And I'll give you the copy. That is, how come this little girl, you could, if I had, I would have shown you her practicing shooting practice to shoot us on a machine gun. She's training. A little girl training and depositing £5 billion. Do you think Mala Zenawi is worth 3 million? Rubbish. His wife runs the multi-billion conglomerate and sits over the board of those 66 major companies. Effort. She is the owner. She runs it. She literally runs it. And beside that, she has got her own private one, and that is Mega Publishing. All the publishing works are under her control, and hence she is branded Queen of Mega. Queen of Mega. And guess what, this shameless lady? She came up and told us, out blank, she said that she lived on her husband's $4,000 salary. $4,000 salary. Who is she fooling, for heaven's sake? Who is she fooling? They have all the money under their control. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to stop in such a 10-minute speech, but it is a government or a regime corrupted to the core. Thank you for listening.
Very passionate speech. I would now like to ask the Council, Kefale Alemu to speak to us on human rights and genocide.
Distinguished guests, Chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary for Service Solidarity, Mr. Dev Anderson MP, Chairman and Secretary of the Service Solidarity, Mr. Lasharie and Saundra, Satterlee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share our views on the current warring human rights and civic and democratic situation in Ethiopia. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Civic group in the UK, which also belongs to and join forces with other political and civic organizations, forming an alliance of the Ethiopian people's struggle, or Shengo. Of course, the future of Ethiopia is on Ethiopians' hands, but we are here today probably just to submit for the record our views, and also ask our friends here from Satterlee Solidarity and other Ethiopian friends to influence the misguided policy of the UK government towards Ethiopia. So my I think speech would be more on the increasing absence of the civic and democratic rights in Ethiopia, and the role of UK government, especially the foreign policy and also development and the defeat. So as you all know, and I think Saundra has mentioned, May 1991, the London Conference led to the assumption of power by the ethnic-based movement of the so-called Ethiopia, which is headed by TPLF. Following that, we had the two meetings here, following especially the 2005 election, where at least 200 people were gunned down, and some 30 to 50,000 have been incarcerated in different prisons and camps. Ethiopians were appalled to see the former dictator Lasharie shaking hands with the world leaders at the Gleneagles, barely weeks after he gave a direct order to the force responsible to the massacre. And some of us have traveled to Gleneagles to protest. The British government was also accused for the training and assistance provided to the brutal force, which used vehicles given by the UK to perpetrate some of the crimes committed during the protest against the vote being completed by the regime. That led to the temporary suspension of the direct budgetary aid the UK was providing, which was soon released to be given at regional and district level. For anyone who understands the nature of the repressive regime, it's easy to understand that it would not make much difference for the aid given to be manipulated by the regime's apparatus through the existing communist-like structure, whether it is given directly as a budgetary support or whether it's given to the regimes. The well-evidenced narrowing of political and civic space in the country since the 2005 election was done under the guise of highly controversial laws rushed and introduced to restrict any kind of dissent against the regime. The current virtual lack of freedom of speech and dissemination of information imposed on journalists and publishers of newspapers was imposed under the new media law. The charity and civil society law, whose restriction on the existence of independent civic activities, particularly on those operating on human rights, women and children rights. The latest and main reason for the lack of human and democratic freedom that led to the dampening or down of any kind of dissent by opposing groups or individuals is attributed to the notorious anti-terrorism law. The role of the UK in continuing to support a minority ethnicist regime that is ruling for the last 22 years by sheer brute force, because, as you know, there were elections and all of the elections were outright farcical, especially those held in 2005 and the result of the 2010 election, which was 99.6% of the vote went to the EPRD. And the last local election, which happened a few months ago, led to an outcome of almost 3 million candidates maybe had been given to the EPRD. So the other point that was raised is aid being used directly or indirectly as a weapon to stifle any kind of dissent and as a punishment to all who oppose the regime is very much widespread. Although there is no direct budgetary support, the regime is controlling all spheres of life up to a cell level, as you know, 1 to 5, by recruiting its cadres in the projects funded by the aid money. This is done openly, as it is well known that you have to become a member of the ruling party to get any kind of privilege, including employment, education, and other similar rights. There is ample evidence that fertilizers and food aid in certain areas have been denied to people who allegedly supported the opposition parties during and after elections. Recently, Crimes in areas such as Ogaden and Gambela included atrocities and displacement of people from ancestral land in the name of development and villagization. Accusations were also made to defeat UK that the government involvement in terms of violation of basic human rights and rights to live in their own ancestral land. The regimes that had received billions of pounds of UK taxpayers' money in the last 2 decades is listed to be heading the country to a failed state in the next decade if things continue the same way. This is a recently released US intelligence unit report that is putting Ethiopia in one of the 15 countries that would be failing within the next 10 to 15 years. The latest evidence is now suggesting that the regime is not only corrupt to its roots, but also have been stashing away stolen money in international banks, and my colleagues have mentioned 12 billion in the last 10 years, and the late despot Meles Zenawi has been exposed to be the richest dictator in Africa with 3 billion hidden away under his name. In this light, a recent event celebrating his achievement in this same house, after he brought such suffering and destruction to many people's lives, is not just a shame, but also shows how some of the current and past politicians and policymakers are detached from the green reality the country currently finds itself. Independent international sources claim that there are still around 10,000 people incarcerated in the countless prisons and detention centers across the country. The list includes 6 internationally recognized journalists such as Kefale Alemu, Alemu, Yusuf Getachew, and 2 other Nigerian journalists, making the country one of the worst offenders of freedom of expression in Africa. That is a report from CPJ, Committee to Protect Journalists. Furthermore, political leaders such as Alderman Zarikun, Bakala Garba, Olbana Melissa, and many others have been sentenced up to life imprisonment for nothing other than waging a peaceful and legal opposition activities. The regime is giving away land, as has been mentioned, to foreign investors from China, India, Saudi Arabia, and on unbelievable low prices, while displacing indigenous people. Recently, the regime also had perpetrated ethnic cleansing of Amharas from the 2 regions in the name of development, that is, Uraferda in the south and Benshangul in the west. Although the regime had admitted the crime committed and claims to bring to justice some of the perpetrators, intelligence received from the victims suggests that they are still being displaced and being targeted to harassment and intimidation. The regime has also been interfering in the religious affairs of the major religions despite the clear description on the constitution about the separation of state and religious affairs. The regime has been imposing its will by appointing its own cadres in the establishment of both the Ethiopian Orthodox institution and the Muslim institutions, denying the faithful to appoint their own religious leaders. So the question is it worth financing such outright dictators who are now ruling not only in the name of revolutionary democracy, but also putting a level of developmental state to cover up for their own party state, one-party state reality that is existing in Ethiopia now. Lagging an economic development of a double-digit growth, while a minimum of 4 to 5 million people permanently depending on food aid, and up to 4 billion, as my colleague mentioned, of foreign assistance a year beggars believe. And by the way, Britain is one of the biggest donors. In this year, Britain is donating 400 million pounds to the regime. The regime is notorious in submitting its own figures to IMF and World Bank. It's well known that the ruling clique controls not only the politics, but as my colleague mentioned, also the major economic sectors are owned by their satellite organizations, who have undoubtedly enriched a few privileged members and their circuits, but the vast majority can't even have 2 or 3 meals a day due to low income and high inflation level that reached up to 40 to 50% at some point. The regime, whose major lifeline are the UK and a few other Western countries, wouldn't have survived and perpetrated such heinous crimes on the people if it wasn't for the short-sighted and unethical policies of successive UK governments following. Furthermore, these policies haven't taken into consideration how the regime's alienation of the population could serve as a fertile ground by some extreme and radical groups to use the situation to promote their views and agenda, which would eventually destabilize not only the country, but the entire region, putting at risk the interests of this country as well. Such a crisis, which there is ample signs that is brewing underneath, if erupted, would be extremely difficult to contain, as unlike neighboring countries of Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is a home for more than 90 million people now, from more than 80 ethnic backgrounds and mixed religious heritage. Currently, people are at the edge of their career. Patience and time are running out. It is a matter of when, rather than if, that they would rise up and revolt against their oppressors. And when that happens, it will be very difficult to predict the consequences, not only to the country and the regime, but also internationally affecting the interests of UK as well. The time to act for those who are far-sighted and responsible leaders and policy makers is now. Otherwise, it may be too little too late to prevent a similar tragic destructions recently witnessed after the collapse of some of the despotic regimes in the North Africa and the Middle East. The UK should review its current foreign policy and developmental aid towards Ethiopia. Humanitarian aid should always be available, but the UK Parliament and government should cautiously review the use of taxpayers' money for the developmental aid purpose in Ethiopia, which is currently misused by repressive and corrupt regime. Aid should be tied up with tangible evidence in respect of human and democratic rights. The usual rhetoric response that there is a tight system to monitor the proper use of the aid provided has been time and again proven to be full of loopholes. We would like to recommend the government considers and attach the following conditions to ensure the proper use of UK taxpayers' money. 1. The immediate and unconditional release of all political prisoners and prisoners of conscience, particularly those primarily recognized by respected international human rights organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and CPJ. 2. The immediate revocation of all 3 draconian laws which restrict basic civic and democratic rights. They are the new media law, the charities and civic society law, and particularly the anti-terror law. And number 3, the immediate cessation of the regime's interference in the religious affairs and establishment of citizens. Number 4, the immediate respect of citizens' freedom to exercise their human and democratic rights and the right to freely express opposing views by belonging to civic and political organization. And lastly, the immediate cessation of divisive ethnic policies that promote ethnic discrimination and targets specific groups, leading to their displacement and ethnic clearing. Thank you for listening.
We now invite to the platform Ms. Agash Istalik.
Good evening. Mr. Dave Anderson, the UK Member of Parliament, members, the committee members, and representatives of the Third World Solidarity. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow citizens. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Dave Anderson for this opportunity and organizing this meeting to discuss the dire situation of the Ethiopian people and the Ethiopian cause. As you heard, the main issues for the purpose of today's discussion has already well covered and delivered by my fellow speakers before me. So my presentation will be brief and focused on the aspect of international law as follows. Now, as you heard from the narrative that delivered, there have been crimes committed by the regime of Ethiopia for the past 22 years on its citizens he's supposed to protect. The crimes, as already expressed in details by my fellow speakers, from displacement to torture, imprisonment, deprivation, the basic human rights, opportunity of their property, denying them freedom of choice, participation, including religious freedoms, which contravenes the UN Charter 1945. The international community drafted, intended to avoid such a heinous crime committed in the whole world on individual human being. It is to maintain world peace and security. The purpose of drafting and adopting, ratifying the United Nations Charter after the League of Nations has failed during the First and the Second World War, where fascist Mussolini invaded Ethiopia and the Japan imperialism invaded Manchuria, which wasn't their part, belongs to China. And the Holocaust, to correct the defects of the League of Nations and to not repeat again another Holocaust. And accordingly, they managed to abolish the minority regime, the apartheid of South Africa. But the international community again failed Rwanda, Bosnia, now Ethiopian sea. Yes. Is it not in the interest of the international community as a whole to act swiftly, immediately, to stop, to end this state-sponsored systematic terrorism, killing, torture, genocide, ethnic cleansing, in contravention of the 1948, the Prevention of Genocide Convention, which Ethiopia ratifies. Most of the conventions, including the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and Economics, Social and Cultural Rights, Universal Declaration, 1948, on human rights. You name it. It is in this regime's constitution, which he drafted and enacted in 1994. Before then, long before then, predecessors to this region, Emperor Haile Selassie and Mengistu, they adopt international conventions because it was important, very important for Ethiopia to adopt those conventions. Because once we felt the heat when we were invaded by the fascist Mussolini, illegally, sovereign states, out of the country, twice, and committed the crime of genocide and the crimes against humanity. Still, we demand, we're still waiting meaningful, proper compensation and apology, both from Vatican for its involvement and the government of Italy. I would like to touch just the 1994, the regime's constitution, Article 9.2, Article 25, Article 35.3. To mention a few. These were adopted, ratified, adopted by those in its international treaties, in its constitution. Yet, he doesn't even respect his own constitution, showing off, boasting about that he is behind all kind of human rights. Now, today the purpose of
we now have a contribution from Mr. Alderman. Alderman, sorry.
You want to speak from your
I think support participation. That's all what we do. And what have we achieved? One of the speakers said 99.6% were elected for the government. One opposition member out of 540 MPs. This is democracy, TPLF style. I mean, do you give up? Do you give hope? You don't achieve very much. And the second factor is the wrong hands of the government are coming to prison, to America. Some of our colleagues that have with British passports, with American passports, who have gone back to Ethiopia to visit relatives or do business, have been put in prison because of their political activities. So we are intimidated, we are frightened, we are scared of this government. Not only our relatives that are being pushed about, that are being moved from their farms, from their houses, and everywhere, and put in prison for what I have said, but also those of us living outside the country are scared of this government. The government is only interested in what we expatriate, in the money we expatriate back home, not in our politics. The government is interested in sending out young people to the Middle East, to America, to Europe, so that they can get more money to the country. They want hard currency. That's what they want to do. They don't want our politics. So we are intimidated. We are frightened. That's why our numbers are very much reduced this time. And this, we are very thankful to have this meeting in Westminster Palace, expressing our views. But we can't do this anywhere else. We can't do this in Ethiopia. Parties can't do this in Ethiopia. And we are very thankful for us to have this opportunity to air our frustrations, our desperations as well. You see, Ethiopia is approaching a population of 90 million now, if not more than 90 million. But the land is being given cheaply to foreigners, to Chinese, Koreans, United Arab Emirates, and so on and so forth. The manager of the Indian farmer in an interview in Al Jazeera said, "My farm in Ethiopia is larger than my village in India." That's the scale. That's the scale. And the Ethiopian people, 5 to 9 million people don't have enough food every year. And the land is now being given to foreigners, and they are taking out all the food that they produce in their agriculture that they farm. Where is the food going to come for all these people now? The numbers are increasing, the destitute people are increasing, the fact their proportion is increasing, and the produce of grains is very much reduced. And I think it's going to be very, very desperate. Above all this, the ethnic cleansing problem is very, very serious. That question that you raised in May in Parliament is a historical question. And we thank you very much for raising that question. It is very fundamental. We have seen the answer. We know the answer. The answer is an official answer. We know what it means. But there's no point going into that now. But it is a historical question. For the last 20 years, Amharas have been cleansed from all sectors of Ethiopia. Yes. In the beginning of the 90s, a recent clergy interviewed by media said less than 10% of the Amhara population living in eastern Ethiopia is remaining now. More than 90% have been evacuated. They have been sent, to other areas, to Addis or other areas. So this cleansing, stop and start cleansing is continuing very, very seriously. And what happened in Wolaga in the 90s is also another serious indication, where 150 to 200 people were thrown into ravines. About 30 of them are Oromos. Because they assisted the Amharas, they were also thrown into